So I'm going to do a brief overview of some of the things that we're thinking about at Taylor and Francis in how to find and reward peer reviewers. And looking at some data across a wide range of TNF journals in 2016 to 2018, on average, around 26% of reviewer invites sent led to a completed report being returned. And that was incredibly variable across subject areas. So arts and humanities were out in front at about 52%. Some of the medical subject areas were a bit lower. There are all these databases, and there are tools which add on to these databases to help support editors in finding the right reviewers. And most of these tools work by putting in maybe the abstract or the full text of the article and then searching the database. It brings up articles which it thinks are related and shows you the authors of those articles as potential peer reviewers. Anybody who uses PubMed a great deal might be familiar with Jane, which is a free online tool that can do this in the PubMed database. And one I just want to mention at the moment is Reviewer Connect, which is actually a Publons tool working off Publons and Web of Science data. And we're currently actually running a test of this on 6 of our journals. So those of you who use ScholarOne Manuscript Central for your journals are possibly quite familiar with the reviewer locator interface, which is on the left-hand side of the screen here, where it just brings up within the system a list of possible reviewers. On the right-hand side, this is the view in Reviewer Connect, which is potentially integrated into the system. And it does look quite similar. It shows you the most relevant works that it's found that links up the article that you're looking at with the Web of Science data. But there are a few additional bits of information that Reviewer Connect gives you about the reviewers it's suggesting. For example, it shows overall exactly how many articles that person has in Web of Science, so you can get that immediate sense of the seniority of the person involved. If they've got a verified ORCID, then there's a little kind of symbol on the account, as you can see. And also it does a quick search for whether that person might have a conflict of interest relating to that article. So does that person maybe look like they're at the same institution as the authors of the article? Or from the searches that the tool has done, does it think that they might have co-published together? So it brings up the little kind of red flag, not as a do not invite, but a maybe check before you invite. And we're testing out whether we would recommend this tool by looking at it on 6 biomedical journals. And the team that are testing, what they're doing is they're running the Reviewer Connect search, and then they're checking some of those suggestions to see would they invite them as a peer reviewer. On these journals, these are very selective journals, and they're looking for researchers who are maybe a bit more advanced in their career, so they are selecting for a minimum of 20 previous publications. So they are being quite selective about who they're picking, and they are following all these other criteria when they're checking the suggestions. And overall, around 27% of the reviewers which were checked were in the end invited by the team. And if 27% sounds low, I'm going to tell you that my experience with this kind of tool is that's actually very good, particularly on such a selective set of criteria. And it did vary a huge amount, as it always does with subject area. If there's a particularly niche article, it can be very difficult for these kinds of automated tools to pick up exactly the right keywords and do the matching quite as well. But on some articles, it was up to 70% of the suggestions were suitable. And the team certainly found that the extra information used by displayed in the list helped them to use that tool more effectively. as well as finding the right peer reviewers in the databases, actually expanding the diversity of the reviewer pools for journals is really important. So I think other publishers have reported very similar data, but if you look at the number of reviewers that you get from different countries, even though there's the massive surge of publications coming from China, there's not the same number of peer reviewers. So again, looking at some data from us, in 2016 to 2017, across a wide range of subject areas, there were 24% of the reviewers were from the USA, but only around 5% from China. But what was very interesting as well is that if you were to send an invitation to a reviewer from China or India, you were much more likely to get a yes, which is obviously clear because they're not being invited to review as much, so they've got more time to do it. And one of the ways that we're looking at working on this and trying to increase that engagement from China and India is actually in launching a new training program to try and bring on board researchers in these regions. As Gavin just mentioned, getting good practice instilled very early on in a career is a very important thing in publication ethics, very important in peer review as well. So we're aiming to engage with researchers who are at the point where they've got enough experience of being an author and being in the field that they should be starting to get involved in peer review. But maybe they've not had huge amounts of reviewer experience yet, or they just don't know the journals. So we're looking at, we will be launching this summer some in-person workshops. But what's really key is we want to make sure that participants who do have enough experience do also link with relevant journals. So if the editor of a journal is interested in getting some more reviewers from these regions, we can say, hey, we've just trained somebody. Let's put you together, and we can organise a few bits of feedback as well on those initial review reports, so that the reviewer also gets that idea of whether they're doing a good job and how their skills as a reviewer are developing.